The next type of chart we're going to look at is a stacked column chart. So it's columns as before because it's going upwards rather than sideways. And it's stacked because instead of having a solid column, what we have is a column that's split into categories, in this case with the categories corresponding to income groupings. The most common use case for this type of chart is to show individual and cumulative proportions. What I mean by that is individual proportions, we can compare one slice in this column to one slice in this column. So for example, in both years 2006 and 2013, 9% of the population earned between $15,001 and $20,000. So we can see that by comparing those two. But we can also compare cumulative proportions. So for example, if we wanted to look at what proportion of people earned 20,000 or less in both of those years, we would add up all of these numbers and compare it to all of these numbers. And even just visually, we can see that in 2006, there were quite a few more people, or a larger percentage of the population, earning below 20,000 because this is bigger than it was in 2013. Again, we would just add up all of these numbers to figure out what that proportion was in 2013. When we do those comparisons, they need to be mutually exclusive proportions. And what I mean by that is nobody can be in two of the different categories within a single column. So it's not possible to both earn between 15,000 and 20,000 and between 10 or 15. Everybody's one or the other of those, but not both, or one or the other of the categories in the overall column, but not more than one. So this type of approach can be useful in comparing those differences over time, as I just showed before, where we were looking at the difference between 2006 and 2013. But the same is true if we had groups. For example, one could be males and one could be female, and we could be comparing the differences between those two groups. Some things to be aware of when using this type of chart: they tend to work better with proportions than absolute values. So the chart that we're looking at now is exactly the same data as the previous chart, except the previous chart was showing the proportions that were in each category, where this chart is showing the absolute number in each category. As soon as we do that, it distorts our ability to do those comparisons over time because, for example, if we're looking at the number of people who made between $50,000 and $70,000, we can see that it's bigger in 2013 than 2006. Because the total number of people included is bigger in 2013 than 2006, it's a little hard to know whether this proportion is bigger or it's just reflecting a bigger total number of people. This type of approach also works best when we have a natural ordering of things. So in this case, we're going from a loss to people who earn nothing, to people who earn between $1 and $5,000 and so on. And that's what allows that cumulative proportion to be really clear and useful and understandable. But imagine if these categories were instead something like occupational categories. So we had plumbers and bricklayers and lawyers and accountants and things like that. There wouldn't necessarily be a natural ordering to those, and it wouldn't be as easy to group things together and say, well, these three occupational categories had this level of income, because the categories might be scattered all about the place because there isn't really a natural order there. As mentioned previously, legends often usually work best, if they're in the same orientation as the chart itself. So in this case, the chart is showing in a vertical orientation with the different categories, and if we make the legend match that, it becomes really easy to figure out which category grouping goes with which legend label. And that's true even in a case like this where our chart uses a lot of different shades of gray and blue and things like that, and if these were arrayed horizontally, it might be hard to figure out which one's which, but because they're arrayed in the same order as the chart, it just becomes easier to figure out which blue and which gray are which.